Good morning. Hello and welcome to the HGKC podcast series, where we talk to people in business and people who support people in business around the things that are important to them right now. As we know, we've just had a change of government in the UK and we have a new Labour government and we've got some proposed new changes to legislation. So I've asked the excellent Stacey Mead to join me today after our very interesting podcast that we did last month around compassion even cost the earth in terms of supporting people. And we thought it'd be a great time to follow up before it all becomes legal. So welcome, Stacey.
Morning, Kim. Thank you for having me back again. It's great to chat again.
You must have been inundated already by people asking you questions. Yeah. So what I thought would be really useful for us to do today is to say, well, okay, we've got a proposed shape out now in the bill. And it's got some few key topics that we can take people through so that they can follow it in a sensible order than try and tackle some of the legislation that's out.
Brilliant.
So I thought if we start with some of the top of the mind things that are important to people, I suppose one of the biggest ones is this day one right for workers.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, and it's been this way for quite a while now, so the biggest thing in this is the right to make a claim for unfair dismissal, and that's a day one right. However, at the moment, it's not related to that. You have to be employed for 2 years before you can claim unfair dismissal. Now, what the new government are proposing to do is to change that and to make it a day one right. So what that would mean is that employers would need to be more cautious about the way that they dismiss employees. And that's not to say they can't dismiss employees, but what it would mean is that they have to make sure they're going through the correct process and a full process to do that. So it could mean something like a full capability process or a full disciplinary process, rather than just bringing somebody in and saying, actually, this isn't working for us. There's going to be a lot more hoops for an employer to jump through to get to the point of fairly terminating someone's employment quicker or earlier on in their employment.
It's really tricky, isn't it? Because a lot of us go into new roles. We might have quite a long probationary period based on the type of role it is. Some roles, you're not really going to have much evidence of people's proven capability till they've done 3 or even 6 months in that role. So there's a real challenge there, isn't it, around how you measure people within that probationary period versus a conflict maybe around day one rights too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the critical thing. A lot of this legislation or proposed legislation that we're seeing is actually about upskilling your management team so they know how to manage people. It will mean investing more time in your employees. So throughout that probation period, having a proper process where you can measure these tangible elements of what you're looking for them to do, or the points you're looking for them to achieve, rather than just sort of a feel. At this moment in time, actually, it can be quite flexible for employers. If they don't think somebody's right in the role up to 2 years, then actually you don't really have to evidence anything to say why you think that. Whereas actually, I think what the proposals are trying to do is to get businesses to act, I suppose, fairly or transparently in terms of the reasons for the decisions they're making. I think it's also about then encouraging people to move roles. So at the moment, we don't have people moving roles as much as they used to because they have to wait 2 years to have any protection from unfair dismissal. Whereas actually what Labour are proposing is if you've got that day one right, you will feel more confident in moving roles. And therefore, we will have a more agile labour market. We'll have new ideas coming through. And I think that's the aim of it. But what we need to do as businesses, as employers, is make sure that our managers are skilled enough in the management of people, not just in the job that they do. Yeah.
That's a real part of this challenge, isn't it? Where it moves the responsibility in your business.
Absolutely.
And we've already got quite a focus on our management skills are pretty poor in the UK overall. In terms of training, not people's necessary capability, but the training support to give managers, particularly in these areas of managing people.
Exactly that. As we've always said, and I think I said last time we spoke, people often get promoted because they're good at the job, not necessarily because they're good at managing employees and have the skills to do that. That's a whole new tool set which employers need to be passing on to their managers to enable those processes to work effectively.
It's also really interesting, and we've talked about a lot about employees, but here there's also this definition of the worker coming out as well. Who is a worker versus an employee? This is really challenging. We've seen a real move of the last maybe 20 years around much more of self-employment, gig economy, a mixture of freelance and individuals being employed, not on an employment contract, but on some kind of other type of contract.
In between a bit, isn't it? You're right. At the moment, we have 3 categories of employment or engagement, if you like. So we've got self-employed, or we've got employed, or we've got this middle sort of grey area, which is called a worker. Now, workers are entitled to some statutory rights, but not all of the rights of employees. It's this weird sort of in the middle. And the issue we have, I mean, as the HR department, we've actually campaigned a lot to remove this worker status because it's so confusing for people, and people don't really know where they sit, and businesses don't really know where they should be allocating or the type of contract they should be allocating to people. But the issue that we have is that whilst in the HR side of things, the employment legislation side of things, we've got 3 titles, if you like, for engaging people. On the tax side of things, HMRC, you've only got 2. You're either self-employed or employed. It's binary. And what Labour are proposing is actually to bring those in line with each other. So as the HR department, actually for us, we've been campaigning for that for a long time, and it will just make it much clearer for people. You're either employed or you're not.
Yeah, and there's much more clarity around what the dividing lines are. And that really helps managers as well, doesn't it? Because it really helps them focus on the different approaches that they need to take, but also be fair in the way that they treat people. So that will be really interesting to see how that develops over the legislation. I'm really looking forward to recording our next episode of this.
Yeah.
What's going to happen next, which is really great. I mean, we just talked there a bit about those different statuses, and that's perhaps about one of the next key things, which is around this firing and rehiring. Now, we don't see this as much in the smaller firms, the independent firms that we work with. And this happens much more at the the international
big corporates, isn't it?
And those large businesses. But it could still have issues for seasonal workers, for instance, in a lot of the smaller businesses that we work with. So what's your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Kim. We don't see it a lot. It's things that we do talk about with clients. And I think when we're looking at smaller businesses, it would be more where there was a genuine reason for it. So it's not just necessarily about cutting costs and things like that. It would be actually our business isn't going to survive if we don't do something different. The aim of our approach with our clients at that point is, okay, well, you go through your consultation process. There is never a point of you just go in and dismiss people and then re-engage them. You go through that consultation process with the aim of hopefully reaching agreement. I know I've done consultations for clients before where their business was in a difficult position and their entire team has agreed to take a 10% salary cut. And it worked because what happened is then actually they got the business back to a better place and they were able to reinstate those salary figures, which is ideal if you can reach those sorts of agreements. Now, what's really interesting about the proposed legislation about fire and rehire is that it's not just a blanket ban. It's proposing that actually, unless there is no alternative. So actually, if your business was in dire straits and was on the verge of collapse, you need to do something drastic, then actually in those situations, this sort of thing might be acceptable. But again, our approach to that would be, well, actually, you consult with your staff with the aim of getting agreement. So it's not so much, we heard about the big P&O story where they'd sort of cut everybody and then re-engage people on much lower wages and things. But I think that's the sort of thing they're trying to stop.
There's those disaster stories that you hear in the national press around sweeping changes to contractual terms and conditions, which haven't had the appropriate consultation. It also made me think about what's happening with Amazon at the moment, about the warehouses. All the individual ones have to then take their case to get unionised. And that is one of the things that might change as well. And that might come out of some of the redundancy consultation as well. So what do you think about that in terms of this collective consultation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for consultation. And again, the aim is always about getting agreement with your employees. And if you can achieve that, then that is brilliant. And hopefully it works with everybody on board, everybody's working to the same plan and everybody's engaged with it. I think broadening redundancy consultations, what we need to consider is actually the additional work, the additional impact that has on businesses. I mean, perhaps slightly different for the type of businesses I work with. They tend to be more local. So actually, when we are doing redundancy consultation, it tends to be with the whole company, or they tend to be in one site anyway. But when you are looking at places like Amazon with different warehouses all over the country, actually, if you have to consult with everybody, that's a lot of work for a business to take on, isn't it? It's time consuming, and time is money. So they will, again, need to think about these processes and how they manage that.
For numbers of employees, perhaps by site or by total employment, those sorts of criteria might be deployed.
Yeah, I think they will potentially have to. I don't think you can just say if you're proposing to make 20 redundancies, you have to consult with everybody across your company, because actually 20 people could not be many people in terms of the number of people you employ. We always have a thing of when you're consulting for redundancies, it's frightening for people. And if you then have to consult with everybody, even potentially people who aren't affected, actually it's about the message that is sending to everybody. It's really about containing and controlling the message that's being sent out to your staff, to your workforce. Because if you're having to tell them every time you need to make changes in a department that doesn't even affect them people, the message, the continual drip feed of those changes actually can be quite soul destroying for people and may worry them enough to potentially look elsewhere for jobs.
The rumour mill is a really powerful thing.
Absolutely.
So having much more clarity, I think. So I think that one is going to need quite a lot of work in terms of scope and granularity of definitions, I think. So that's what I'm going to be looking for as the legislation starts to come out.
And I think that's the key thing, isn't it? That they've put forward all of these proposed changes within the first 100 days and everything. Not everything is going to come in, and things will evolve. There's consultation that this needs to go through. There's discussion that this needs to go through. So it might not look like it currently looks by the end of it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the hot topics that they campaigned on is the 0 hours contract.
Yeah.
And what happens through that process of moving from everything to exploitative and making that clarity. And I think this is part of the process, isn't it? Not all are exploitative, not all are without consent or appropriate. We've all known industries where 0 hour contracts have been very effective, but there's others where obviously it is used to cut costs and it's very competitive.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Doesn't it, for people's things like tax and income credits and all of this kind of thing because of the minimum hours. So
so you're absolutely right, and it's really interesting, as you say, they've gone from a complete ban to now exploitative. But we have clients that use 0 hours, particularly the hospitality industry, and where they are consensual, where they're in agreement, actually it can work. The difficulty is, you're absolutely right, there will be external factors where people need to work a certain number of hours or can't work above a certain number of hours and things, so that needs to be managed. I think for me, it's going to come down to interpretation of legislation. What does exploitative mean? Because that could mean something very different to one person than it does to another. And it could be about how people interpret it, how solicitors interpret it. I think that we'll end up with probably a test case somewhere in a tribunal that will then give us a specific definition.
Because you do need it. A lot of these things are proved in the case law, aren't they?
Absolutely.
And I am worried about how they're going to enforce it and that kind of drip feed in. Because if someone says I'm on a 0 hours contract where I normally work 12 hours a week, if some weeks it's 12 and the next week it's 15 and then following week it's 0, what will it mean for the employers?
Exactly that. And particularly they want to bring in the right to have more regular hours or be told for more regular hours, isn't it? That can be really difficult in some organisations, in some industries, because it is seasonal. I think it will affect some industries more than others. If you're working in an office 9 to 5, It's pretty standard, isn't it? But when you've got seasonal workers, when you've got hospitality, bars, golf clubs, all those sorts of things, where there are times that are busier than others, actually, it's how do we manage that? And how do we encourage business owners that employment legislation or HR is not their day-to-day job?
No.
You know, and this, I think this is the issue, that actually it's about educating small businesses. They won't have somebody full-time doing their HR. They don't have an employment solicitor on hand full-time. Nobody can afford it, particularly not in a small business. And it is, as we said, the number of small businesses in the country, I think you said 99.9% or something of businesses are small businesses. So actually, how are we educating these people to understand that when you set up a business, it's not just about doing this job. There's all these other things that you have to comply with. And if you get caught getting it wrong, and as I've always said, I think that there are few people that intentionally get it wrong. A lot of the time it's through miseducation or not knowing things, and so you're not aware of what you're meant to do. And that's how people get caught. So I don't think a lot of the time people are deliberately trying to avoid paying the right hours or paying minimum wage and stuff like that. But it's a lack of education, a lack of knowledge. And it's how we get that message out to people. There's lots of funding and things from local authorities trying to upskill people. But again, lots of people don't even know about that.
They've got to take the time out of their business to go and learn this other thing as well.
Yes,
and there'll be lots of other areas like finance that are asked to draw on that time as well.
Exactly that.
And I think making some of this more accessible and to the people who are in the line management roles, making it much more accessible to them so that they understand, because they're implementing it largely, aren't they?
Yes.
Dealing with it. If it's your head of operations, because you don't actually have an HR specialist on site or on your payroll, who are the people that we could really skill up to make them more aware of some of these things?
Exactly that.
I think one of the biggest proposed changes is the right to switch off, which I think is a glorious title for something.
Lovely, isn't it?
And family-friendly rights that they are around flexible working. And I think this is a response. It is all, an automatic response to the pandemic, work conditions. But I think it was part of a trend before that. We forget that lots of things were going more this way, and it just amplified it and accelerated it.
Yeah, I think
it wasn't a trend that was not already happening, because we were already seeing that in the difficulty in particularly working mums, that sort of thing, more flexible contracts, more job shares. We were already seeing lots of more people taking sabbaticals, more people having flexibility in other ways. It was already happening. And what it did, it just made it all go boom a lot quicker.
You're right. It made everybody stop and think, actually, we need to accelerate this stuff. Things have been changing, and they have been changing for the better. And I think there's a new generation of a workforce coming through, and they have different expectations and different ways of living. So actually, this remote working, hybrid working, family-friendly policies is what attracts people to your business.
And I think, we've also got to accept, when I entered the workforce, women retired at 60 and men at 65. So you kind of knew really how long you were going to work. And it was very rare to see people, other than people who work for themselves, people in employment sectors, over those ages, because companies enforced those policies. And it was also driven by insurance and other things. They couldn't really have older work. I mean, there was a whole industry about retiring people at these fixed ages.
Yeah.
Now we're all working to 67 and whatever else.
Well, so that's it.
Spending your working life, what we're doing. So we have to think about, to keep people well and to keep people working, we need to have a different approach to work and what the role of work is in people's entire lives. Okay, we all need to work to earn money to live, but
we need to have that balance, don't we? Because if we don't have that balance, actually, people will look elsewhere because other organisations are offering this. And that's what it's also about, isn't it? You're absolutely right. It's like taking care of our employees so they stay well, they stay healthy, but it's also about being competitive against other companies that want our staff.
How do you attract people? So we know we've got a shortage of people, of working people. So over 1 million people over 55 stopped working in the pandemic. It was a lot of people to take out of our workforce, and we haven't put them back yet by a long way. So we're carrying something like just under 1 million vacancies in the UK at the moment. It's a lot of people we need to be in work.
Replace.
We're not.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of people who are ill. You know, a lot of people are suffering from things from the pandemic as well still. You know, we've still got a lot of people to look after in the country. But I do think the right to switch off is really important one in terms of this always-on lifestyle. Yes. You know, we've all got devices. You know, we're online now. You know?
Well, exactly, but it's also led, isn't it, by that hybrid and remote working. We're all working from home. So it's not like we close our laptops and go home at the end of the day, because actually we're already home. So I think you're absolutely right. The right to switch off. We see it in Europe already. In France, it's enshrined. It's a really, really important piece of legislation. And we just haven't sort of had it here. But I think what's really interesting with the right to switch off, again, it will depend on the type of business that you're working in, the type of role that you're working in, because there may be emergencies where you need to be available. But I think what will happen is it will come down to individual negotiations. It's sort of like the 48-hour opt-out. You can opt out of it, but you can also not. So I wonder if it will be sort of presented something like that. So it'll be down to each business, I think, depending on the nature of the business, to negotiate with their employees about what that right to switch off means. Does it mean that in an emergency we cannot contact anybody? Or does it mean that we just need some holiday authorising if we can't email you that night to do it, sort of thing? So
I've probably noticed it. You see it quite often people's email footers, don't you? That I work. These are the 3 days.
I love those ones.
You know, these are 3 days I work. I normally reply here. That's becoming much more common.
I love it when people put, I'm responding at a time that's convenient for me. I do not expect you to respond now. I love that. What a brilliant thing to say. Because actually, when somebody does email you, I think we all have that bit of, oh God, I've got to reply now. Whereas actually, if somebody's saying, reply when you're ready.
So these are lots of little changes that people will be bringing about. So how do we help businesses keep informed and can find the bits that are relevant to them? Because not everything that we just talked about is appropriate for everybody, is it? You think, well, I don't really employ people, but this one applies to me.
Yes.
To me.
I think it's seeking help and advice where you can. So that doesn't necessarily mean signing up to a subscription thing or anything. You know, we do newsletters for people that sign up to our mailing list. And, you know, that's always got sort of the news flashes on or the upcoming legislation. Remaining aware of that. ACAS are great. You know, CIPD are great at putting things out about potential changes that are coming through. I think the key thing for me is try and remain as aware as you can of upcoming changes. But actually, if you're employing people, getting specific advice for your business is critical, because you're absolutely right, Kim. Not everything will apply to everybody. It won't be relevant. And some businesses or some industries will have to do more than others. Just seeking professional advice so that you don't get caught out.
Oh, that's a great point for us to end our conversation today, I think. So I will be putting Stacey's details up with this post as well. Contact her at the HR department. There you go. It's very easy to Google. They're a fantastic organisation that provide lots of advice and support to people in business. Thank you very much, Stacey, for taking us through the updates on legislation. And I look forward to recording another update when we have a bit more information.
Thanks, Kim. It's been really good to chat again.